Well, so happy to be here. I think that it was like 2 summits ago in Venice. I sat on a sunny day with Nato and the rest, and Sally and the rest of the creative team, and Junaka approached me to pitch some ideas, which a year after now have manifested itself as the current commission by Creative Time, which is a house of political horrors called Democracy, currently in a stage in Brooklyn. And I'm gonna make a kind of a super fast walkthrough of this haunted house. But first, in order to come up with a definition of what democracy meant, a made-up word, we created this kind of dictionary entry, which somehow puts together several ideas on, our kind of conflicted conception of what democracy or this combination of extreme anxiety that is felt and is the topic of this panel also. So when you enter the Brooklyn Army Terminal, which is this massive building made in 1917 for the First World War, I think of this building as a kind of a big factory of death. Imagine, all the weapons and bombs that end up destroying the cathedrals in Europe, etc., having like this kind of big concrete space. You find this effigy, which is the Statue of Liberty as a Trojan horse, which is inspired in a cartoon that Argentinian cartoonist Kino made in '68 as a comment of the Vietnam War, and which somehow was, referring to the constant, endless kind of engagement of the United States in global conflict, and in the name of exporting democracy or exporting freedom. So, obviously the Trojan horse is, supposedly a gift, but that in reality is inhabited by soldiers, and that's what you first find when you enter the space. So you walk through this very kind of a big site, and then you board a van, and you're not sure if the show has started or not, but then you are stopped by cops, and I think that, most people in the audience, if someone is watching this lecture and plans to see the site, this is a total spoiler, but if you want, then I'm gonna tell you anyway. So, basically, a lot of the material that we use for the project has to do with what you see all day, what's been so present in social media, etc., through, police brutality. And here you experience a kind of a stop and frisk situation where, you are not fully aware that the show has started. And then, even if you realize that you are in theater, this kind of typical or a kind of old school guerrilla, invisible theater, political theater element where you're not sure if it's kind of an act or a real thing. But after the shock that you're welcomed by these cops into the building, you suddenly are led to voting day. You're suddenly on November 8th. And you're greeted by this lady who searches for your name, and then you go to the voting station where you find a ballot with a series of questions. And so this is a sort of referendum on, issues that we all care about, or well, you care as United States citizens, but also the world cares. And then, after you walk out, you find that all these ballots are being shredded. So that is all a kind of a situation. Then, you go into another room, and where there's a kind of Tupperware party with some ladies that have this kind of neighborhood reunion, but they're talking about, like guns that come in different colors, and they are colored according to, like seasons, as in a kind of a comment about fashion, and you experience this sort of a normalized situation of gun ownership that is so pervasive. 62% of weapons sold worldwide are sold to civilians in the US. And then the next room speaks about another kind of a silent killer, which is the opiate epidemic, where you are in a kind of a hospital room with a waiting room where someone who's like totally addicted wants to get pills from you, and all the kind of a big pharma situation. Then I'm gonna just like run through these rooms because it's, and next you go to a funeral home, which is sort of this funeral home is now selling coffins in the shape of your favorite junk food. So you have like a sort of coffin, this is a child coffin in the shape of a Twinkie. And it's just, a comment also on another silent killer, which is, like the toxic food that is kind of omnipresent. And then suddenly you walk again into another situation, which is a boardroom, a corporate boardroom, where these, when you're asked to vote on a bailout that the company is asking, and if you vote in favor, you get a big golden parachute, and otherwise you can vote in order to save the company. So if you vote to save yourself and get this big bonus, you're invited to go up into a fancy party. But if you vote to have like and show some decency, you end up being the help, and they give you an apron, and you have to be a kind of you're instructed how to cater to the crooks that decided to take the bonus, and then you enter the party where this kind of a couple called the Shikrelis are telling you about their new hobby, which is rocket racing to the moon, and you have like a kind of situation where you have this kind of you exit, and then through a convoluted passage through a air duct, you are led then to the classroom of the future. The classroom of the future, in the future there's no teachers anymore. It's kind of a computer avatar that now is giving you the class, and basically you're instructed how to use your bulletproof blanket in case of a shooter enters. Then you go through a kind of a boutique that sells artisanal air. Like air is not kind of breathable anymore, so you can buy Himalaya air. And then there's another scene, which is one of the most Halloween-like, that is a spoof of Grease, like their kind of quintessential kind of a high school musical, which is, in this case, performed by some cheerleaders that are singing "You're the One That I Want," but which is about, like abortion. So they're burning this witch because she wanted to abort, and it's somehow like inspired in the hell houses that the extreme right puts. I actually, in a previous visit to Washington, witnessed like a kind of a big parade where anti-abortion high schoolers came here in a big demonstration. So I was traumatized by the event. So I was, it was like a source of inspiration for this scene, which like a Halloween is, somehow like came out of this big feminicide, which was, like witch burning. And Then you take the time travel elevator, which takes you into the future, and it's like a kind of a time machine that starts to get like hotter and hotter because the temperature in the planets are rising. Then you arrive suddenly to a natural park, but it's not in parks in the future. Don't exist anymore, but you have virtual parks. So you're asked to have to put your kind of a virtual reality headset, and this is something that can continuously. There's like a kind of use of technology in the show, but always to mock technology, and the promises that supposedly brings. You're chased by a kind of a Smokey the Bear with a chainsaw. Just like the show starts to get weirder and weirder until you suddenly find a situation where you see a family in a kind of somewhere in the Middle East that is having a kind of just like a normal time, and on the other side of the room you have a drone pilot, and you realize that something is going to happen. So it's a very sobering moment where you have like this kind of a very serious moment about which obviously comments on the indiscriminate way that drones have been used as in modern warfare. And then after that, suddenly 3 doors light up, and you see these 3 doors that says like Trump, Other, and Hillary. And you have to choose, no? It's a moment of choice. Some people go one door, some people go the other, and Hillary, etc. And then you find yourself in this kind of a soccer match where, depending on your choice, you have to play this soccer game where Earth is the ball. and that's kind of the closing kind of event of the haunted house. The whole kind of experience lasts about 1 hour. I think I totally spoiled the surprise because it's like telling something that is a kind of a theater play in the way of a lecture is not the usual way to, not the best way to compared to experience it, but as a way to reflect on the experience, I think that what was great about doing this project is that haunted houses are a form that has always been associated with a kind of a cheap format, no? Like it's a kind of a very grassroots, like a true folk tradition, which was a great format in order to do an immersive theater experience that also happened to be the combination of 2 events, no? Halloween and the elections, and the background of all the psychosis that is experienced, where everyone is checking how the polls are going, etc., just became like the perfect background for such a project. Because the worst that was coming out in the news, the better that it could be for the project. I think that that's the wonderful thing about art, that allows you to transform the worst things in the world into something and work with it. And basically, I would tell you all to go see it, but I think that there's also kind of a ticket sold out, so. You will have to, I hope that the presentation just at least gave you a glimpse of what this is, as far as it is from the real thing. But thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Pedro. I really like this, so I'm going to interrogate everybody, because democracy is a nightmare now.
Yes.
And what was I going to ask you? There's so many things. In some ways, it's the nightmare of reason. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember this no reason you would, but there was a famous book about the Vietnam War and how it was designed by our leading political scientists, and these very high achieving, the greatest. The book was called The Best and the Brightest, and that's who did it. And in some ways, this is a nightmare brought on by reason. So I'm trying to get you to say something so that I just don't stand here looking like a doof. Okay, the one thing you missed: debt. Where's debt, buddy? Where's debt? We're all in like, everybody's coming out of college now, $100,000 in debt and all this stuff.
Well, there were many scenes that we had to cut. I mean, we had like so many other ideas, and like.
No, I know.
Yeah.
That's a bullshit question. Okay. Trump, Hillary, or other?
I mean, it's very curious. Me?
Which door?
I am for Hillary, but I actually have good things to say about Trump, which, would be just like a kind of a surprise in the context. For instance, like you were mentioning.
He wouldn't return your compliments.
No. I mean, I don't. No, of course not. But the thing is that, I mean, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership was something that like had me totally paranoid and traumatized. And I think that, in the kind of the debate, there was a cost for Hillary to continue supporting the TPP, which, she dropped because of this kind of moment where the race was. So I think that there's, and also, I think that the ideology around Trump is so toxic that maybe with him and other things about race and gender will drop, hopefully. I mean, like, it's just like I'm trying to see a kind of positive outcome of all this traumatic experience.
You think there's a positive outcome on the horizon?
I am a kind of Panglossian kind of a mind where you always try.
Hey, come on.
I know, but it's like the problems are opportunities in disguise.
All right, I love that. That's great.
Thank you.